All right. So James and I are going to talk about the Odyssey. Hopefully. Fingers crossed, toes crossed, earlobes crossed. We can make the review shorter than the movie. What do you think?
I think it's possible.
50-50?
There's a lot we could talk about, and I'm like wondering how much do we want to actually talk about? How much deviates from the myth? But other people have probably covered that as well. And I mean, I was only using AI to cross check that,
Yeah.
but I think there's plenty to talk about outside of that.
All right. So what were your impressions? Oh, spoilers. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be
Yeah.
spoilers. The epic is thousands of years old. Hopefully, we passed by the general spoiler thing, but there are a couple of spoilers about the movie. But given that we're encouraging people not to go, or at least I am, what were your thoughts? You settled in for the long haul, the opening, and what were your thoughts?
So, uh, there were things almost right away that took me out of the movie. So like the one of the suitors, the black guy, kind of had a ghetto accent. It's like, yeah, doesn't really fit for a Greek epic, just
I
really
think
sort
it's
of
it's
slot
Homer,
in.
not homeboy. That generally
Yeah,
is
yeah.
my homeboy. That was
Yeah.
bizarre to me. I mean, just
Straight out
by
of
the
Ithaca, not
by,
Compton.
there's
Yeah.
only
Go
one
on.
Greek guy in the whole movie, and he's being lectured to by an Indian guy in English that they're Greeks from Ithaca. And I'm just like, I went with my wife. My wife is Greek, and
Yeah.
her hands closed around my forearm like she was trying to scoop out a new penis. So, yeah, it was wild.
Yeah. So that sort of, took me out right away. Uh, and overall, I found it was very confusing. There's a lot of jumping back. I got used to the jumping back and forth. And I was looking for things that I recognized from the myth because I don't think I ever read the Odyssey, but I definitely heard over the course of my life various, tropes and things from it, and there's a lot in there that's actually culturally impressed upon us. Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships. I mean, that's just, well known. Yeah. Um, it's yeah, like the casting choice, you get it these days. Okay, yeah, they're gonna do,
They don't have to.
yeah, I know they
So
don't have to, but
so
yeah.
in the Hollywood stuff, like you have to have a certain amount of diversity and gay characters and so on in order to, but there are exceptions for historically accurate blah blah blah. So he
Mm,
absolutely didn't have to take a long, so slow, squalid number two dump on Western culture and history. There's absolutely no factual requirement for it. And of course, I would
mm,
assume that this stain of desecrating a canon of Western literature falls on everyone involved: the cast, the
mm.
producers, the funders, like everyone. And of course, here's the thing: people don't understand economics, right? So they say, "Hey, man, if you hate the movie so much, why are you giving him money to go see the movie?" And it's like, well, you know that if I can encourage other people to not go see the movie, then it's a net loss for the movie makers. Anyway,
Yes.
so as you went on, and it's a real drug trip because I think in general he's addicted to these. Was it lotus flowers? Is that right? So
Mhm.
he's a drug addict. He's an opiate addict or whatever. I assume that they're sort of stand-ins for poppies or something like that. So he's a drug addict, and his memory is emerging from this 7-year hallucinatronic deal with the Charlize Theron character, and so his memories are kind of emerging. And by the way, what an insane universe that the black woman is the most beautiful woman in the universe, and the Charlize Theron character, who's gorgeous, is just some weird, isolated washerwoman who has to drug an old guy just to keep him around. But the black woman,
Mhm.
oof, she's a smoke show that never ends. It's just bizarre. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah,
Did you start to get
go ahead.
like when did you start to I tried to scrub my mind and go in with an open mind. Like tried to, I
Mm,
want to be fair, and I don't want to go in like I'm determined to hate this because, there are people who are determined to hate what you and I do, and I try to, have them not be that way. So I'm like I am going in as a blank slate. Was there a particular point where you began to feel uneasy? I mean, you knew probably about the Travis Scott thing at the beginning, but was there a time where you began to feel like you and the movie were parting ways?
so, I don't know if I quite went in with that sort of, I didn't, like, mentally prepare myself for that, but, I wanna be fair to the movie as the movie. But even the movie itself has just things that don't really work. But I can't help compare it to the myth, right? Because I know the myth, right?
Well,
And
it's
so
based on
I'm
the
like,
myth. It's supposed to tell the story of
exactly,
the myth, right?
it's supposed to, except it's not based on the myth, but we can we can get to that, I'm sure. Um, so, where I think and it's actually started pretty early on. I got lost with Lotus Eater Calypso thing, because if you look at the myth, those are completely different sections of the actual epic. Um, it was Odysseus is trying to grab his men away from the Lotus Eaters, so all his men were still
Who are
there.
drugging them to keep them around, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like in this one, he's
um,
stuffing the drugs in his own mouth. It's his men being drugged and he's trying to rescue them. So that seems
yeah.
like they're actually predatory. They rape the men, the women. And at this point, she's like some sort of bizarre trauma therapist with ice blue eyes. It's just this weird thing.
Oh,
Sorry, go on.
oh, it's crazier than that, 'cause not only she's a trauma therapist and she's drugged him to keep him on the island. So she's the cause of his addiction and also the result like, trying to heal his mind through weed, right? Well, just to say weed, right?
I
'Cause
think
weed
it's
is its
stronger
whole
than
thing.
weed, but yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah, for sure.
you're right about that. You're stronger than weed for
Yeah,
sure.
so why would you
Um,
drug someone to keep them around and then try to heal them to send them back? Like that makes no sense. That's like buying somebody,
yeah.
it's like kidnapping someone and buying them a bus pass at the same time. Like it just doesn't really follow.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say the thing that, and it took me a bit to figure this out, but the thing that really did lose me is like, what is Odysseus' motivation at all? Like, why? Like he's taking forever to come home, and the movie's answer to this is that he feels guilt and trauma over the war, essentially.
Which is
Um,
not part of the original. I did actually read
is not.
the
It
Odyssey
is
because I
not.
did an English degree, so I had to plow away. So in the original, a brother he has no problem with raiding Troy. He has no problem with winning. I mean, he literally is supposed to be the smartest. He's not the best warrior, but he's the smartest guy,
Mhm.
Odysseus. And so he comes up with the whole Trojan horse thing to win the war, like where they pretend to leave, but they're actually inside. So he comes up with the whole thing to win the war, and then he's like, but the guilt and it's like he's a warrior, he's a king, Anyway, we'll get to that in a sec. So no, you know
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
I'm just going to follow my train of thought.
Go for it.
So he's a warrior who wishes to slaughter all of the people in Troy, which is in modern day Turkey. And by the by, the Turks and the Turks and the Greeks have been going at it for ever and ever. Amen. So he wants to win the war. He wants to get back home to his wife. He has this brilliant stroke of genius about winning the war. And then, as an ancient warrior who's well versed in the art of combat, he's surprised when there's some violence inside of Troy? Oh no, who could have imagined, as a warrior who's been a warrior my whole life, who is very keen to get inside Troy and end the 10-year war? Oh my gosh, there's violence inside the city. Like, how? Oh, this is so insane to me that it's this whole modern boomer Vietnam PTSD nonsense
Mm.
that, oh, it's just so terrible. And also, if he's so horrified at violence and the slaughter of the innocent and the slaughter of the soldiers who've been trying to kill him for 10 years, why is he slaughtering all the suitors? I mean, oh, violence is so terrible. Chop, slice, slash, hack, gouge, kill. And it's like, oh, man, if you're going to make him a pacifist, make him a pacifist. If you're going to make him a
Right.
violent guy, don't have him regret. It's just more of this programming white males to not to not take vengeance or have violence. Oh, it's a curse. It's all this Christian boomer nonsense. Sorry, bit of a
Yeah.
rant there, but it drove me a little nuts there.
No, for sure, and, that was just I didn't put 2 and 2 together about what that was until I was, like, basically on the drive home, uh, back and forth with voice, with, taking my notes with Grok and everything, and I'm like, "Okay, so what was Odysseus' motivation in the Odyssey itself?" It's like, to get back home. It's like that was his single driving force to get back home, right? And he lost all of his men, right? Um, and he finally gets back home, and so that was like, oh, he had there wasn't anything about this, this guilt and this other stuff and end of civilization stuff, which was just shoehorned in somehow.
So they didn't know this at the time, but
Uh,
basically the Trojan War destroyed Greece for over 2,000 years. Like, so
okay.
after the Trojan War, and also in part because of the bitterness of the Odyssey about the Trojan War and the waste and the horror of it all, then Greece was ruled, like, why did Greece never become a world power after the ancient world where it was a foundation of Western civilization? And one of the reasons was the Trojan War and the bitter writing about it, which is like, okay, what's the point of all of this stupid fighting over nothing, which is sort of what's happened with the West as a whole over the First World War to some degree. And so this sort of the end of all things, you can make a case for that, because for the next 2,200 years, Greece was mostly ruled by others, and they didn't fight back. And part of this sort of was the pacifism or the despair about the warrior ethos that comes out of the Odyssey. So I can certainly see how you could make that case, but it was made not because they pursued a stupid war, but because they lost some general civility. It's like, but you've got to treat people as well as you can, because they could be gods in disguise, which is a terrible reason for treating people well. So you're supposed to treat people so well because they could be gods in disguise, except for the suitors. Now, the suitors, okay, so you can argue that the suitors were really pushing his wife to get married, and one of them, or two of them, the black guy and the guy from Twilight, Robert Pattinson, who was very good in the movie, by the way, but they're plotting to kill his son. Okay, so that's bad. But the Trojans were plotting to kill all of his soldiers, and he was following a guy who slaughtered his own daughter to get favorable winds to go and start the war in the first place, which is why he ends up being killed by the black woman's twin sister. The twin thing also is kind of crazy because, I mean, if he's going to have a black woman as Helen, then he's got to have a black woman, for obvious genetic reasons, as the sister. But if he hired two black women to play two Greek women, that would be twice the outrage. So he's got to make the woman a twin. And why did she get scars on her face? I asked AI about that, and I'm not sure exactly how she got the scars. Helen, how did she get the scars on her face? When the Andrew Tate guy was sort of saying that about her, but I don't know. Do you remember why? I didn't catch that.
No, I forgot to ask what that was
Yeah,
about.
AI didn't know. AI didn't think she had any
Yeah.
scars. AI thought I was talking about the scars on Odysseus's feet. But okay, sorry, I took a bit of side quest. Now we can do
That's
the
fine.
background to the movie, or we can do the problems with the movie. Should we do the background first? Like the sort of
Sure.
history. I think it's worth doing that. So I took a bunch of notes about the sort of background to the movie. And so, summarize, right? Odysseus is a Greek king trying to get home to Ithaca after the Trojan War. He's the king of Ithaca. He faces monstrous gods, temptations of Cyclops, sirens, Circe, while his wife Penelope fends off the suitors back home, so she is in the modern equivalent of Tinder, right? Because the average woman has like 100 guys after her, a reasonably attractive woman, and she's got 100 guys, and they're just kind of floating around waiting to marry her or something like that. After 20 years of wandering and struggle, he finally returns, disguised as a beggar, and reclaims his throne. Epic tale of cunning, perseverance, and homecoming. Now, Odysseus, they missed a bunch of key stuff for me. And in particular, this is with the Cyclops, Polyphemus. So the Cyclops. Okay, I was going to do the backdrop. What was your experience of the Cyclops sequence?
Okay. So they get into the cave. Cyclops comes in, and you get either there's in the cave or lit by the fire. You see his face. It's weird, tilted eye, like kind of like a flounder fish with disfigured nose, which
Yeah.
is a bit like, why? I mean, I don't know if how much Homer described the Cyclops, but eye in the center of the forehead. So not here, right? But here, right? Um, but I mean, not particularly disfigured. I mean, it's some kind of race thing, or there's some kind of race of giants in these Cyclops things. Um, so yeah, big, lumbering, slow moving. Like when I used to weigh over 300 pounds, right? So like the guy is like moves around, moves so slow, roars, doesn't. And I'm like, didn't he speak? Right? I mean, my memory
No,
of myth.
he
Yeah,
speaks. He mutters to himself, and they say, "Well, why can't we reason?" I mean, it's like the time for arguments is past, or we're beyond reason, or
yes.
something. So yeah, he's intelligent enough to have a conversation.
So, he's just the effect of the Cyclops was weird. Like, they try to run out. and the Cyclops slowly moves his foot towards the soldier, and then the soldier slowly flies against the wall, and he's dead immediately. It's like it, it looked it looked gummy, weird. I guess you could say uncanny.
Mm.
I don't know. Like
Yeah, I think that special
CGI should be
effects, yeah,
better.
special effects have not improved too much, and I'm not sure exactly why. So here's some logical
Mm,
problems I have with the Cyclops. So they land on they follow the sheep, right? Ah, but we got to go where the herd is, right? So why does the
mm.
Cyclops have sheep? Why? No, because he's a carnivore. He eats two guys a day, right? Two guys are like 4 times the size of sheep, which means he's going to have to eat 8 sheep a day. He's got like 20 sheep. So that's 2 days and 2 days at a breakfast worth of food. So why does he have the sheep? He doesn't need the wool because he doesn't use clothing. He doesn't want the sheep to make feta, the milk to make feta cheese because he's a meat eater, right? At least that's the general assumption. And plus, they wouldn't be able to produce enough. How is he going to milk them? Like, why does he have the sheep as a whole? Now, I get that maybe in the original, blah blah blah, but you got to explain things in the movie. Now, why does he eat two guys, see all the rest of the guys, and then just fall asleep? Like, can you imagine? You got guys in your home who are there with swords, and maybe they're shorter than you or whatever, right? So you've got midgets in your home with swords. You don't know what they're there for. You eat two of them, thus pissing the rest off, and then you just fall asleep. That makes no sense to me at all. Now, you could say, well, he's just a dumb animal, except he's smart enough to talk. So why doesn't he talk? Why doesn't he say, why are you here? And again, you can say, well, this is in the original, but you have to explain it in the movie because people haven't read the
Yeah, yeah.
original. Why does he fall asleep shortly after having his eye poked out? I mean, I got to tell you, if somebody poked out my eye, I'm not sure I'd be dozing off sooner after. How is he able to chase the soldiers down to their ship despite being totally blind and in horrifying pain? Why is the son of Poseidon living on a cliff in the hillside? And there was a bit where I may have drifted because I found it very hard to pay attention to the movie at times. So it seems to me, because Odysseus says, well, we can't move the big rock. We got to wait for him to move the big rock. So from what I saw, he moved the Cyclops moved the big rock, and then what he did was they seemed to get out. And then suddenly they were back in again and stuck. And maybe I missed something because that first time he moved the rock, they were all supposed to go out into the outside and get free and all of that. But suddenly they just ended up back in again, despite the fact that the guy had unrolled the rock. And I didn't quite understand that. And
Yeah.
then the other thing that bothered me quite a bit about all of this is in the original, like in the actual poem, Odysseus says, I'm nobody, right? Because there's a conversation. I'm nobody. And then the Cyclops says, oh, nobody is attacking me. And therefore he doesn't get any help from whoever's around, right? So that's kind of a joke. And the director, Christopher Nolan, said he couldn't find a way to make that work. But one of the main reasons why it takes Odysseus so long to get home is because when he's leaving, he says, know that it was Odysseus who put your eye out, sucker, right? In the Travis Scott way, right? So it was Odysseus wanting to claim his victory over this Cyclops and give the Cyclops his name, and that's how the Cyclops tells Poseidon to get this guy. And that's why Poseidon then makes it so hard for Odysseus to get home. And that's just, it's an important fact because Odysseus is played as a victim. Like the gods are just against him. He's just trying to survive. It's partly the vanity aspect that he wants to claim the victory over the Cyclops and therefore gives the Cyclops his name, which gives the Cyclops an identifier to give to his father Poseidon to then prevent Odysseus from getting home. So the pride goeth before a fall thing, all of the morals and all of the self-generated issues based on vanity that Odysseus is subject to, completely gone.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, I think the from what I recall about them trying to escape initially is that that was when the Cyclops slowly kicked the guy and he slowly went and like died when he hit the wall, which just didn't seem to make any sense. Like realistically, it's like
And why don't they
physically, it's
stab
like
the Cyclops with their swords in the toes or the
sure,
hands while
sure,
the hands are coming down?
yeah. No, they just decided, okay, we're not going to try to get out now because he's right there, right? But I mean, he's not gonna get to all of you. Look how he moves,
Well,
right?
you have
It's
to do
just
it at some point, right? You have to try and get out at
yeah,
some point.
yeah,
And also, th- uh, look, I'm not a military guy. I've done a bunch of research for military stuff for my books, but you just have to put yourself in the mindset of really experienced military guys. So what you do, you're Christopher Nolan, pretty much anyone's going to talk to you. You've got $250 million to make a movie. So you call up experienced soldiers. You call up Navy SEALs, right? And you say, if you're in enemy territory and there's 50 of you or however many, 40 or however many there were, there's 40 soldiers and you are going into a cave in enemy territory, what do you do? Well, what's the SEAL going to say? Is he going to say, oh, yeah, you totally all go in and you don't leave any guards outside and you go in because there's sheep? And you don't just grab the sheet and immediately get out. You go in and hang around for a while and you poke around things on the wall and then you realize that the cave is occupied. You just hang out some more and it's like, oh my God, why should I care about people surviving who are this stupid? You leave a
yeah,
guard outside, you rush in to get, because they're hungry, I get the guard. You rush in, you grab the sheep, you get the hell out, you hide, you slaughter the sheep so they can't bar, like them all just going in and hanging out without any guards outside makes zero sense. And I cannot have compassion for characters who act in this absolutely stupid way. And it means that none of the soldiers were advocating for their characters. So I've been an actor, of course, and when you're an actor, you advocate for your character. It's one of the things I liked about the movie Alien, the second Alien movie, right? Where the guy's like, well, let's just go and nuke them from orbit and let's do this. Like all the stuff that the audience is thinking. Like, if you're stupid enough to wander into a giant's cave, knowing that there are giants and magical creatures, if you're stupid enough to wander into and hang around a cave which is clearly inhabited by some huge, dangerous giant, with no guards at the front and you're just hanging out waiting to chat with the guy, I cannot really care. This is like watching somebody playing Russian roulette and, oh no, they died. And it's, oh. And Christopher Nolan does technical stuff. He does not do actual people who make decisions and want to survive. So sorry for that rant, but that just drove me completely nuts.
yeah. No, I mean, that totally makes sense. It didn't. It didn't rise to my like, oh yeah, that didn't bother me so much watching it, but
I mean, I'm not
it
a
is also
soldier. I
like
would have left a guard out front.
yeah, no, it's well, they all go in, and one of those first things Odysseus does when he walks into the cave is he eats the cheese? What like, what do you even know? Like, you don't even know if that's cheese, like, I mean, maybe you're Greek, I don't know you do, but still, it's like, what? That and they don't clear the room, like, like, make sure there's nothing else in there,
And how does the
and
giant milk the? At least they could be giant sheep. Like, 'cause how is the
sure,
giant with his big fingers? Like that's like you and I trying to milk a mouse. Like it's just
sure.
not gonna. So I mean, I get the suspension of disbelief and all of that, but not this far. Not you, and you have to solve. See, in a movie, you have to solve problems that you don't have to in prose. So in prose, if I write, "There's a giant and he's got some sheep," right? Okay, then the audience will generally say, okay, well, he can't be like 20 feet tall because then he couldn't have, right, milked the sheep and he couldn't possibly get enough calories. Right? Human beings who are active need like 3,000 calories, males, like a day or something like that. Right? So he's like, what, 10 times the size. So bro needs 30,000 calories. Where is he getting those from? From a couple of sheep. Like, so when you're showing the actual creature and its size and the entrance and if you say they tried to get out but they couldn't in the story, people would just make up why they couldn't. But if you're going to show the guys like there's a hand coming down to grab you, you stick it with a knife. You've got a giant sword, it's going to do some damage, right? If somebody pokes my hand with a needle, I'm going to recoil automatically. So do they want to like so in movies you have to solve problems that mere text doesn't, because you're creating the actual visuals and size and ratios and all of that. So
Yeah, yeah, and, I mean, the moment the Cyclops comes in, he's completely he very look he appears to be very simple, right? Except he does eat the 2 of the men, um, and then immediately falls asleep. That's another thing I saw with this movie, a couple of things with passage of time. Um, like, this didn't seem like there's any passage of time whatsoever after he ate the men, went to sleep, and then Odysseus is like, I think he's asleep. Come on. Like, there was no sense of, like, a cut or a break or a fade or whatever. Filmmakers do all these things that they can show, it's been some time. Like, they're all sitting away from the fire. Oh, yeah, I get away from the fire, but they're all fully illuminated by the fire still. So, I mean, it's the orders are confusing, not followed. I mean, this is a whole military thing, like, again, not a military guy either, but yeah.
And the other thing, too, is Poseidon must be stone evil, right? Because if your son comes to you and says, this guy blinded me, I mean, obviously you'd say, gee, that's too bad. What happened? Well, I ate four of them or five or six. I killed a bunch. And it's like, well, you attacked them first and you were keeping them there. They couldn't leave. And you were trying to kill them as they tried to leave. Well, what were you expecting? Right? So the fact that Poseidon is so family or race loyal that he's going to punish Odysseus. Now, you say, oh, but he was trespassing. It's like, yeah, but the punishment for trespassing isn't chewing people. Like, it's not cannibalism, or eating people is not, it's not really
Right.
cannibalism. I guess he's a different species. But so Poseidon is then evil, and the good or evil of the gods is not addressed, because the only
Mm,
god who shows up, and I have a whole bunch of questions about Athena, the Zendaya character.
yeah.
But, she shows up and she's trying to be reasonable. Like, why don't the gods talk to me? Bro, you're literally talking to a god saying, why don't the gods talk to me? Which made no sense to me. And she's like,
Mm,
yes, but the god, does not pain communicate things to you? Does not fear, does not death communicate things to you? And stuff like that. It's like, well,
mm,
so Athena is a good god. Is Poseidon a bad god because he wants to slaughter people? Why did they say the sun god and not Apollo? That I don't know exactly.
mm,
Later on. But if the gods are evil, like, I'm going to thwart you and get your men all killed because they acted in self-defense after my son tried to kill you all, that would just make Poseidon like a Tony Soprano character, like just an absolute mafia boss that, and
mm,
I didn't get any sense of whether the gods were good or evil. And of course, now the gods show up less in the Odyssey than they did in the Iliad, which is the one that describes the end of the Trojan War, but they're still supposed to be there, but he chose not to have the gods in. And, that's just an artistic decision. I don't have any problem. The gods only show up as like thunder and things like that, which is not particularly vivid. But, and then the giant armored people. Oh, can we talk
oh,
about the tin can giants? Okay, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, again, just purely what they looked like. They looked like, that fake foam instead of, like, actual metal.
They look
Like,
like
it
what?
didn't look like, it looked like fake armor. It didn't, like, look like actual metal armor
Right.
to me. So that was a weird thing. Also full plate armor in, what was this, 5th, 6th century BC Greece, right? I'm just whatever.
I think
Over
it's further back than that, but go on.
Yeah, yeah. So that wasn't a thing, like steel iron armor, back then, definitely not a thing. Um, really strange how they just sort of they came upon a child character who was all fully decked out in armor as well, and the child laughs and screams and runs away, and then they're beset upon by these creatures. Now, I'm like, I had no idea what this was supposed to be in the myth or from the myth or what we're referring to. It might be the Lystragonians,
They are
but
supposed to be just giants,
just
not
giants.
giants hanging around in full armor with all their weapons for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah.
No
So it's
reason.
like,
Like, we just went hiking a couple of months ago in New Hampshire. We did not go hiking in full plate armor or in, with full strapped down weaponry and all of that. It's like, what are they doing just out in the woods in full plate armor for no reason whatsoever?
yeah, and then of course, the trees magically move to imprison the men, and so they stab them through the trees. And again, the lumbering slow, like they swing, and it doesn't look like it's gonna do any sort of real. I mean, yeah, sure, it's a threat, but all you have to do is like do a little power walking. I mean, it doesn't like that whole execution did not was not compelling.
12th
Um,
century BCE. So 12th
okay,
century. So it's, yeah,
over 3,000,
it's
yeah,
a long and a half. This is why I said for like 2200 years or like it was. So yeah, no, it was a long time ago. But yeah, that just drove me nuts. That these guys are just like mindless killing robot machines, and for what? They're not at war. There's no war. Because if there's a war, why is there a kid there? So there's no war. Why are
Yeah.
they just
Yeah.
hanging around in plate and just want to slaughter everything that moves without any conversation? Oh, you frightened our child. It's like, oh, that just drove me nuts too.
I literally did have to thought, like, what are the Cylons doing in the Odyssey?
That's right. That's right. And old school Cylons, not even the
Yeah.
new hot models. Yeah, that's right.
Or no, maybe those, the metal men that they had. Whatever, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same you get the joke.
Right, right.
But yeah, it's like the sort of bizarre thing. And then they're going out and they're, they pursue them to the coast and they destroy all the ships and only one leaves. And I asked, Brock to sort of what was this actually supposed to be? 'Cause I didn't remember any of this stuff. I didn't remember magic moving trees. I didn't remember this weird sort of like armored men in the forest. It's supposed to be the Lystragonians, cannibal giants, and these are the guys that are throwing boulders into the sea
Yep.
to sink Odysseus' ships. Now, the Cyclops went into the water and threw one boulder, and just a poof, basically a nothing burger, right? I and this is, I mean, this is a creative choice of the movie. I get all that stuff, but like when at the time that in the myth when Odysseus arrived at the shore, he had 12 ships, and so in the movie they only have three. Okay, fine. I mean, you can make that choice. It's
I'm sorry, what you mean by ships is not ancient Greek ships, but Viking longships. Again,
yeah,
only separated by 2,000 years and an entire continent, but okay.
yeah. I mean, I didn't catch that myself, but yeah, it's definitely not the same, right? Because the Greek ship was much lower. Is that right?
I
Yeah,
think so, yeah. They
yeah,
look to
yeah,
me like I'm not an expert. They just look like Viking longships to me.
yeah, yeah. Um, so I mean, these armored giants are going in there, basically tear the ships apart with their hands. But I'm like, well, why did they not have these boulders being hurled off the cliffs by these giants? And I don't even remember like what the actual interaction between Odysseus and these giants were. Were they just set upon, or they were kept captive? They were eating them, or whatever the case was, or they just plain attacked them because they were they're hostile to all outsiders.
Or they
Um,
frightened a child or whatever it
or
was,
they had
right?
frightened a child, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I was just thinking, like, you have access to all this other stuff, all these, presumably, all this, uh, CG thing. Would it not be more epic and actually feel threatening to see boulders being hurled towards these ships? Now with maybe three ships, it's like, I really can't do that because there's only three ships. With the 12 ships, you could kind of do that, and it's like only one gets away. That's more gripping, I guess. But and again, that's like a creative question. I mean, that's a fully creative question, but the way it was done was like they come in, they sort of rocking the boats back and forth and tearing it back, and it's just
Mhm.
it was underwhelming
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. And once you're driving them away, why would you want to keep killing them, right? I mean, they're already leaving. And sorry, just to back up to the Cyclops for a second, and this, so I put a lot of trust in people who make art, and I myself write novels and so on. So I try to make this realistic. But the Cyclops, blinded in agony, running down a hill, right? All you have to do, literally, it's this simple as a movie maker, right? So you should, wherever possible, you should try to do what your characters are doing, right? So all you need to do is blindfold yourself when you have a bad headache and try running down a forest hill. Like you're going to run into trees, you're going to trip, you're going to so if the movie maker can't put himself in the Cyclops' position and say, what would it be like? Like at least show him feeling his way or tripping or something like that, right? But no, he just comes crashing down as if he can perfectly see. So what was the point of blinding him if blinding him is no different from him being able to see? And so again, if you say, well, the Cyclops chased them in the poem, then people can imagine that he's tripping and stumbling. But if you're showing the Cyclops coming down, it means you haven't even put yourself in the position of a blind character trying to run down a hillside. And that just means that there's zero inhabiting of the characters on the pod, because he wrote it too. So there's no inhabiting. And if you're not even going to figure out what it's like to be a blind character, in the movie, the Al Pacino movie where he plays the blind guy, I can't remember the name.
Scent of a Woman.
Scent of a Woman, thank you. I
Yeah.
mean, he did a huge amount of research. He knows how to unfocus his eyes, and they have to figure out that he's blind. So, I mean, can you imagine a scene in Scent of a Woman where he's playing tennis? as the blind guy, you'd say, well, you can't
Hooah!
play. Yeah, you can't play tennis as a blind guy,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so it's like, and so you wouldn't trust the movie makers if they hadn't. So having that, just I need to be able to trust the movie maker. And this is another thing to do with the world as a whole, which
Mm.
is there's much more detail about the Odyssey, like the whole journey, right? There's much more detail about that than there is, of course, about Lord of the Rings. Now, in Lord of the Rings, there are all these maps, and Rohan is here, and the Shire is here, and Mordor's over there, and right, Gondor's over there, and you get a sense of where places are. I had
Mm.
no sense of where anything was. They're just like bouncing around like a pinball. Like there's no sense of passage, just a bunch of oceans and then there's another island. And I just did not get a strong sense of, but this is actually rooted in facts. There are maps of where he goes. And it just would have
Mm.
been really helpful as a whole to just have them not bounce around in random places to random new islands, to have a sense of, is it summer? Is it winter? What is the passage of time? Why is
Mm.
there an Indian guy who's the voice of reason and second in command? I mean, it takes them 10 years to cross the Aegean. Are you really going to say it's easy to get from India to it just to make no sense? That was just beyond. But that guy already owned the Beatles in that other movie. So, um, just wanted to mention that as well. And I'm trying not to nitpick all of the logical issues, but some of the basic ones to me were really, really disturbing because again, I need to be able to solve this. I need to understand that the movie maker understands the characters that he's creating, and if they're going to put
Yeah.
a quarter of $1 billion, sorry, and half a dozen
Oof. Wow.
years, and you've never figured out what it's like to run down a hillside when you're blind, I don't understand that at all. Like it costs you nothing, and you just need to solve that problem.
Yeah. This might be skipping ahead a bit. Do you want to just sort of go more in order, or do you just want to sort of? Because there's another one of those things that's just
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
incomprehensible. Incomprehensible. Sorry, which one?
You can go. Let's go theme, not sequence, because I mean the movie's all over the place, so we can't go in sequence anyway because it goes
Yeah, yeah,
back and forth in time.
yeah, yeah. So, well, this is one of those like this was completely incomprehensible. Uh, when I was just reviewing the movie in my mind. Okay, so, um, Odysseus comes back. He's the beggar, right? And the queen wants to meet with him. And so they have this long conversation, and she doesn't recognize him at all. Like she now, I mean, I know it's been
20
20
years,
years.
man. That's a long time, though, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if she suspects or not. I get, yeah, 20 years is a long time, but it was also a bit like he never faces her, so I guess that's fine too. And your voice does change over 20 years, but man, I don't know. That kind of it bothered me. It bothered me at least a little bit. It's like I just
So, I mean, it's an interesting question. So, if you, let's say that you hadn't watched the Odyssey, it's kind of tough to think about in hindsight. Let's say you
yeah,
hadn't
yeah.
watched the Odyssey, and somebody played you, Matt Damon, playing Odysseus. Would you have recognized Matt Damon's voice? Because he did
Just the voice.
roughen up his voice quite a bit.
No,
Because he,
I wouldn't have. No, I wouldn't have recognized his voice. I don't
yeah.
think.
So maybe, and we've
Yeah,
obviously heard a bunch of Matt Damon's been in like 50 movies or something like that. So
yeah, 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 yeah. No, no, I would say he. Yeah, know what? I would say he doesn't sound at all like he did in, just sort of vague memory, like Good Will Hunting, right? As much younger.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it
No,
could be the
so
case, right?
that's a fair point. It's a fair rebuttal. It just seemed odd to me that I thought, yeah, 20 years, but yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I'll say that's something I was noticing thinking about, but yeah, I
And
mean, 20
I
years
can live with
is
that
kind of
because
long.
also she would never expect him to come back as a beggar. So if it's a beggar you
True.
can't really see,
Mm,
he's kind of mumbling in the dark. I can kind of get. By the way, I just wanted to mention Anne
mm,
Hathaway absolutely slayed that role. And it's fairly
mm.
underwritten role, except for the feminist bit about, oh, because I don't have stubble on my chin, I can't be king, right? But
Yeah.
she was. I've never really thought much about her as an actress. She just seems like this big-eyed cutie pie, but like she's half anime. It seems to me. I
Yeah.
did see her as Fantine in Les Miserables, but I thought she was great in this role. Like, she really tore into it. And like they call it a scenery chewer, like you're so acting, or like the Swoosie Kurtz thing in Liar Liar, overactor. But I thought she just ripped into that role, and I thought she did a great job.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely a great presence. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, other things. Let's just bounce around, and then we'll do the story, then we'll do the backstory, if that's all right.
Right. Right.
So, Zendaya. First of all, why does it
Mm,
always look like somebody just squeezed a lemon up her nose? Like, she's always got that. Because, as I guess she's sort of non-whitish, and non-white people always have to disapprove of white people, and they always have to be wiser than white males in
mm,
particular. That's just a fact. Whenever there's any conflict between a white and a non-white, the non-white is in the right. And so I got really confused about this, and I asked AI, didn't have any luck, because these aren't AI generated things, but I wanted to double check a few things with AI. Maybe the movie's kind
mm,
of new, so it doesn't know. So in the Siege of Troy, after they get in, Zendaya seemed to me to be one of the priestesses or acolytes in the temple of Athena. And
right.
then she's got her head down and she gets beheaded. And then at the same time, they behead the actual statue of Athena, and the statue of Athena goes bouncing down the steps. You remember that part, right?
I do. Yeah,
Right. So isn't the Athena character, the Zendaya character, isn't that his guilt over setting the events in motion that had the young woman be beheaded? Now, AI did say that Athena also talks to Odysseus' son, the Tom Holland character, and Tom Holland
yeah.
still seems to have more testosterone than Elliot Page. But anyway, less testosterone than Elliot Page.
Oh dear.
But but I don't remember that. Doesn't Athena or the Zendaya character only talk to Odysseus? Or do you remember him her talking to anyone else?
I I do not remember her talking to anybody else,
Yeah.
and it was very clear that when he would talk to her as if she was there when other people were around, like a complete hallucination.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
So
no one else
so
could see her.
she
Yeah.
she didn't she seemed like this sort of Chris was the Nash character from A Beautiful Mind.
Oh yeah,
Do you see that person? So she seemed to me to be a figment of his imagination, because none of the other gods are shown, and she's supposed to be this Athena character, but she seems to me a figment of his imagination about the horrors of the siege of Troy, because he saw this
Mm,
girl get beheaded right in front of him, and then she shows up, and he feels really bad about. So I don't know that she was actually Athena.
mm,
It just seemed very confusing to me, because she did seem to be a real person who got beheaded. So if other people can explain this to me, I would appreciate that, because I can understand that if you start a siege and then you watch some young girl get beheaded right in front of you, that would leave a bit of a scar. But of course, it's not generally the case. Then when there's a siege, they don't kill the young females. I can tell you that. That's not generally how history works. Genghis Khan didn't just go around killing. He'd kill the males and impregnate the females. And
I did
so,
notice that too. It's like, wait, they're killing everybody.
yeah,
That's usually not
why
how
would
that
they be
works.
killing the
Yeah.
girls, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? Maybe the old women or whatever, right? But even,
Uh,
soldiers who've been at war for 10 years, this is not any, I'm just talking about the facts. They tend not to be overly fussy at the
yeah.
females that they can get a hold of. Um, so the modern idioms I didn't like. I didn't like the
Mm,
American accents, and I didn't like the Indian guy with the witch, like the witch who turns everyone into pigs. He's like,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
it's
seriously,
okay.
yeah.
It's okay. It's like, okay. Okay. That's like 3,000
Yeah.
years ago. They're not saying okay, bro. And they had an F off, and I can't remember
Yeah.
the idiom. It was something like blah, 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 and stuff.
Uh,
And it's like, look, I'm not saying you've got to be Shakespeare, but that's wretched. It was way too colloquial. Oh, you got total daddy issues, bro. And it's like they would use pater, father, they would use some sort of formal, particularly with your father. So I thought that the colloquialisms and the idioms, I don't mind. You got to dumb it down for a universal audience, maybe, whatever, right? But
mm,
I just thought it was just gutting the language. Like
yeah. Yeah.
the language is like the eye, the vertical eye of the Cyclops, and they were just like, ugh, blinded.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just too much. And if you don't want to do sophisticated language, don't do an epic poem. And I just thought it was too much. Did it take you out? Maybe it was more of a thing for me. Did it bother you much? Or
Uh, uh, I noticed it a bit less, but I definitely noticed it with Telemachus and, him calling, his parents mom and dad. Couple of things. First off, way too freaking familiar for, like, a son of royalty, you know? Even if you say, let's, the servants will call their parents mom and dad, whatever those familiar terms are. Not in the case for, a royal like a son of royalty, essentially. And, uh, Telemachus, never knew his father. He's been gone his entire life. And so, I mean, there could be kind of like a reverence, there could be kind of like a thing, but it's not going to be warm. There could be some sentimentality for sure, but there's not gonna be this sort of this warmth like, "Dad!" This heart like, "Oh," like, that's not gonna happen, right? He's gonna have more warmth for his mentor,
yeah,
and he does. He has warmth for his mentor too. Um, and I'm not saying that it was played wrong in that way, but it was definitely like, "Oh, Dad." It's like, "No, no, no. No, no, no. No, no, no. Father."
yeah,
You say father.
yeah.
Mother. You say mother or whatever the, honorific would be for the queen, right? Um, and I mean, that certainly took me out for sure, seeing that. And I mean, as I mentioned before, the black guy with his, accent, not even trying, like the actor's supposed to be, or what was this? The actor's supposed to be like the sort of the lens or the glass
Oh,
through which
Travis
you
Scott, the
see the
Bard.
story,
Yeah,
right?
Travis Scott, the Bard. Oh my, it was just terrible.
Oh, remind me of that character.
Oh, that was the guy who opened. He's the guy who's like thumping and let me tell you the tale and blah blah blah, thumping in the bar like
Oh,
the opening.
I
He's supposed
I
to be the bard who's telling the tale,
oh,
and
okay, okay,
yeah,
okay.
Travis Scott, the Bard, was just wild. I mean, I don't know that too many rappers have done songs about the Odyssey. I don't really think that's a thing. Okay, Tom Holland, you got to explain this to me. I do not like. I mean, he's supposed to be this warrior. He's got the arms of a noodle. He's got the beard potential of a baby's ass cheek. He has lower T than just about everyone else. Who's female. He looks like he should be a Kitty's baseball coach. He has about as much gravitas as helium. I do not understand the Tom Holland thing at all. Plus, he's a British actor, I think, and he's got to put on an American accent for the Odyssey in ancient Greece. It's like, oh my God. Oh, and he's such a bad actor. And let me sort of tell you why.
Mm,
And then you can
okay.
tell me if this makes any sense. Maybe I'm overreacting or whatever, right? Because it should have been mine. That should have been my role. But okay, so Tom Holland, the character, Odysseus' son. So
Mhm,
he's willing to go into almost certain death to find out, to even have the remote possibility of finding out whether his father might be alive. And this is set up like a huge thing. You're going to die. They're going to chase
mhm,
you down
mhm,
in the wilderness. They're going to Ides of March you, and you're going to end up looking like Boromir with some steak knives, right? So
mhm,
they set up this whole thing that this kid is so desperate for news that his father is alive that he's willing to die and almost does in order to find this out, right? So
mhm,
in artistic circles, that's called a setup, right? So
right,
so the setup and the payoff, right? So
mhm,
if a child dies, the mother has to show to really love the child. Now, I love the child. The child's the best, right? And then when the child dies, that's the payoff is like, oh my gosh, she's going to be really sad. So you got to set things up. You got to pay things
mm,
off. Literally 2.5 hours of the movie is the son, the Tom Holland character, desperate to find any news of his father, right?
mhm,
And then he's following Odysseus. He doesn't know Odysseus is his father. He's following him up the hill. And why? Why is everything so ugly in Greece? Greece is one of the most beautiful places in the world. Like the Aegean is aquamarine blue. There are fantastic
mm,
islands. People go there. Greek islands are famous. The whole thing looked like London's damp armpit as a whole. And that was just pretty terrible. Anyway, so Tom Holland's walking up and he finally finds out the beggar says, I served with your father. He's still alive. Now I'm waiting. I'm like, he's going to stagger. He's going to, oh my God, like he's going to burst into tears. What does he do? Oh, cool. Yeah. And they
yeah,
just keep
yeah,
on
really?
walking up the hill.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
what the ever living F is that nonsense? And again, the actor is not advocating for his character. The actor needs to
mhm,
say to the soulless, empty hearted, cinematography obsessed Christopher Nolan, look, You've just set up 2.5 hours of I'm desperate to find out news about my father. I finally get the news about my father, and it's the greatest thing ever. I mean, imagine if there was a story that your beloved daughter or son was kidnapped, and you spend 20
Hmm.
years and risk your life to find out if she's still alive, and then someone tells you, "Oh my God, she is still alive." I mean, you would dissolve, you would freak out, you'd do a dance, you'd burst into tears. Nothing. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
Where?
Not one single actor said, "Whoa, Chris,
Yeah.
you gotta have this moment. Otherwise, the audience doesn't understand the entire movie. Nobody makes any sense. None of the motivations make any sense." Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, just and more than just sort of like okay, cool. Like, no, like press for information.
How do
Like,
you
where do
know?
you see
Where
him?
is
How
he?
do you
What
know? Like,
happened?
yeah.
Oh, it drives me nuts. Other thing. Okay, listen, obviously Matt Damon he's what, 55 or whatever, right? The fact that
Yeah.
he has, granite abs, fantastic. Good for him. That's a lot of protein. That's a lot of, I don't know what he's injecting directly into his nipples to get that physique. Good for him, right? However, I got to tell you, if you've been a drug addict laying around on a beach for 7 frickin' years, I'm going to doubt the reality of your abs. If you've been starving for a long time, I'm going to doubt that you have all of these giant muscles because your body will eat. Like they literally say that we're starving to death. We're starving to death. We're starving to death.
Mhm.
He's got all his muscles. His gums are fine. He's got giant abs. He's not lost any particular weight. He's not like your body will eat the fat and then it'll start to eat the muscles just to stay alive. Now, I'm not saying obviously that they should have CGI'd him or he should have done some machinist slim down or something like that. But it just doesn't make any sense. If the guy's been a drug addict lazing around on a beach for 7 years, he's not going to have abs. He's just not. Abs, especially in your 50s, abs are like 4 to 5 hours a day, an insanely strict diet, 4 to 5 hours a day of exercise and dieting, and you
Mhm.
never see him do a single bit of exercise, and he's just got muscles and abs. Like, I'm sorry, it's just not believable at all.
Yeah.
And that just drives me kind of nuts. That just took me out. Like, where are the abs coming from? Anyway,
Yeah. No, that didn't take me out in particular because, of course, I never had abs, so I'm kinda jealous, but,
well, you have them
um,
somewhere. We all
yeah,
do.
they're
Otherwise, our
different,
intestines would
yeah.
fall out. But yes,
No,
they
yeah,
are
for sure.
minor stealth
But
abs.
no, what took me out about somewhat related to that is, he goes floats out into the ocean onto this makeshift raft, and it's a face of punishment of Poseidon. Let's just sort of not go into that too much into that anymore. But Zeus won't let him die. So then he wakes up, washed up on the shore of his home, and Zendaya his hallucination is like, "Don't you recognize your home?" And it's like, "Well, no, this doesn't look like Greece at all. No." But
When it
no,
looks
it
exactly like how he left it.
yeah.
Like it does. Like
Uh,
he's got the dog where his son is training, right? He's got that
yeah,
little dog that shows up, which gets a much bigger bit in the movie, which is fine. But
yeah.
I mean, how does it look different from how he left it?
I mean, I don't even remember what it looked like when he left it, but it
Well,
doesn't
so
look any
do
different
you
at all,
remember
or
there's that sort of one building, like apparently all of Greece is just one building on a hill. It's
oh,
all Greece
yeah.
is. There's no cities, no towns, for the most part, right? So, and a couple of temples. So at the beginning, his son is training with the guy who says, you're moving too quickly. You need to move slower. And I'm like, please don't give that advice to, to Christopher Nolan because it's just brutal. Please do not tell him you need to move slower because an hour into the movie, I'm like, okay, so only 2 hours only an hour 45 more. An hour and a half, I'm like, okay, we're halfway done. A little over half. Like I literally was counting because I just could not get into caring. And I thought Matt Damon was absolutely
Mm,
appalling. No character arc. He was the same at the
mm,
beginning as he was at the end. There was nothing other than, oh, I'm sad and blah, 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 right? At the very end.
yeah.
He just, to me, it's a phoned in performance. It's not real. He did not. Um, uh, and if you are more traumatized as a warrior by causing some death than it is that you love your wife, then I don't believe in your love of your wife.
Mm,
Right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. This is like a surgeon being upset that he had to cut someone open and so upset that he had to cut someone open that he can't get back to his beloved wife. No, the reason why he couldn't get back is his vanity at bragging about just defeating the the Cyclops. He was safe on the ship. They just, you know that it was Odysseus, right? So, but if it was like, well, I have some PTSD from the war, and that's why I didn't want to come back. Well, why would you not want to come back from PTSD? Because then you get back to your wife and your son, and like, so that
Yeah.
just made no sense to me at all. And then it gets just generic boomer guilt. So, now here's an interesting thing. So this is. I'm going to read this, and we'll put the sources for all of this in the show notes. So this I thought was very interesting. I looked this up. So there's a famous statue of the only man in Troy who saw the trap of the Trojan horse. He tried to warn everyone, and this is what the gods did to him because of it. His name was Laocoön, a Trojan priest. When the Greek army vanished and left a giant wooden horse outside the city gates, all of Troy celebrated. Only, and by the way, why do you put the horse half in the water? Because it's going to be submerged by this tide. And people were drowning. Like, why? Why? That's not, they left it outside the city gates, not on the beach. Anyway, so the Greek army vanished and left a giant wooden horse outside the city gates. All of Troy celebrated. Only this Trojan priest refused to believe it. He warned his people that the horse was a trick, and to prove it was hollow, hurled his spear into its side. So look, it's hollow. In Virgil's telling, he spoke a line that has outlasted almost everything else about Troy. Laocoön said, "I fear the Greeks even when they bring gifts." He was right. The horse was packed with soldiers and Troy was hours from destruction. The sculptor shows what he got for it. What did he get? Tell me, James, based upon your experience of working on this show for many years, when you try to tell people the truth, how grateful are they in general?
Oh, I would imagine that they, held a parade and, just, on bearers, down the city wall. No, no, no. I think he probably got his eyes gouged, his tongue cut out, and
Yeah.
put in stocks or something along those lines.
So he was right. The horse was packed with soldiers and Troy was hours from destruction. The sculptor shows what he got for it. 2 enormous sea serpents rise out of the sea and coil around him and his young sons, dragging all 3 down together. The father's whole body is knotted in the struggle, every muscle straining, his face locked in a scream. The gods wanted Troy to fall, and Laocoön was in the way. The Trojans watched him die in agony and drew exactly the wrong conclusions. They decided the gods were punishing him for attacking a holy gift, so they pulled the horse inside their own walls, and that night Troy burned. The statue is called Laocoön and His Sons. It is the work of 3 Greek sculptors from the island of Rhodes, Agatisandra and Athenodorus, and Polydorus, for whatever that's worth, dates to the Hellenistic period, making it well over 2,000 years old. Buried for more than 1,000 years, it was dug out of a Roman vineyard in 1506, and Michelangelo rushed across Rome to see it the day it was found. It has been called the single greatest depiction of human suffering in the history of art, but it endures because of what it is really about. The man who sees the truth says it out loud and is destroyed for being right while the crowd watches and cheers. It is one of the oldest patterns there is. It has never stopped repeating. There is nothing new under the sun. So I thought that was quite interesting. I also wanted to point out in the movie Black Panther, it's really important to protect the African representation. In Moana, you've got to consult Polynesian cultural experts. In the Odyssey, cast virtually everyone except Greeks. Greeks disregard Homer's source material, then dismiss objections. So what happened in the Odyssey? Well, Christopher Nolan excluded Greeks from their own story. Oh, and by the way, took how many millions of dollars from the Greek government to film subsidies in Greece, right? Race swap casting and hypocrisy. Diverse casting ignores Greek heritage and Homer's descriptions at a time when other cultures demand strict authenticity. A feminist reinterpretation of Homer, Emily Wilson's modern feminist translation, alters the tone and emphasizes female characters. Gender-swapping Greek warriors' dark, gloomy aesthetic, right? Turns sunny, colorful Greece, known for light and beauty, into desaturated, dark, moody world. Wrong costumes, Robin Hood style. Ignores Bronze Age Greek clothing and armor. Dark leather outfits look more like Robin Hood or generic medieval fantasy. Viking ship Anachronism uses a modern Norwegian Viking longship set in 1200 BC, over 2,000 years too late, and the wrong culture. Reinvented monsters. Ignores Homer's description. The giant armored knights were just primitive cannibals in the story. Modern dialogue and changes American accents, contemporary language, non-linear plot, and dismissing criticism as irrelevant. That is not at all unimportant. Now, sorry, if there's more that you want to add or things that bothered you about the movie, and of course, can come back as they show up, but I did want to give a bit of the backstory.
Right. Let's see. Oh, well, I just wanted to finish up the thing about, um, that didn't track for me, when he washed up on the shore of his island.
Yeah, I'd like to find out who's
And
been interrupting you when you've been trying to get your point across. We will hunt
yeah,
them
yeah,
down. Sorry, go on.
yeah. Cut their tongue out. No, no. that was right.
I did it
So,
again.
let's see.
Someone did it again. We'll find them.
No, I'm interrupting
He washed
myself
up
is the
on the
problem
shore.
right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, watch up on the shore, and then again, this is another one of the passage of time problems with that the movie has. Um, he just kind of like he's ready to fight. He's been half drowned, washed up on the shore, and then and also it's been 20 years, since he's been. I mean, he's been fighting on the all along the way, but Matt Damon's 50, in his mid late 50s now, and so he's probably about the age Odysseus would have been, maybe a little bit older. So he's not prime fighting age, you know. So he's past. I'm past it, right? And it's like what late 20s, right? That's your prime fighting age, maybe mid 20s.
Yeah, I mean, probably peaks mid late 20s for sure. And he takes
Yeah,
on like 50 or 100 guys. Um, anyway, so with just a bow. They would just rush him.
yeah. Oh yeah. And then the other thing that's I'll just mention this too. The fighting was all pretty bad, but Matt Damon just sort of doing the shooting the arrow from the hip thing. Yeah,
I thought he got stabbed as well. Like, I could have sworn I saw him get
yeah.
stabbed at one point.
He did. He
He
did.
got
He did.
stabbed. I don't understand how people just keep going. I've been stabbed. My intestines are falling out, but I'm fine to keep going. I get there's a certain amount of adrenaline and so on, but when you're tripping over your own intestines, it just seems to me that's going to put a little bit of cramp in your MMA style.
Yeah. I mean, I also mention this because I'm not a fighter. I'm not a violent guy at all. But I mean, I understand experience definitely goes a long way. That stuff. But you're talking about 50 guys. You know, I mean,
In an enclosed area, and a lot of them are way younger than you are. And by the way, I think I can get you to violence if I keep interrupting you. But go on.
no, I think that's all for now. If there's anything else, I think the only thing I want to sort of touch on as well is the Cersei thing. You mentioned this, you touched on this as well, but she's like, it's like she basically is afraid that the men are going to rape her, essentially, which is obviously absolutely modern injection to the film. That's that wasn't part of the myth.
Yeah, but
She
it
didn't
certainly was
say
part
like
of
rape.
warfare. But yeah, it's not part of the myth. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's like completely terrified. It's like, oh, I mean, I know I said rape. It wasn't said in the movie, but it was definitely like she's so terrified of like take anything you want, like just whatever. Um, and that just was like that was again other things take you out of the movie. That was one of them for me too.
Yeah. All right. So the Iliad comes first. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about the backstory just because you don't know how much the movie's deviated if you don't know the backstory. So the Iliad, the poem, is not about the Trojan War. It opens in the 10th year of the Trojan War. The war is almost over, the men exhausted, the end is in sight, and closes before the war even concludes. It's about what the war costs from the inside without distance, without the mercy of a conclusion. The very first word of the poem Iliad is rage. Not glory, not war, not courage, rage. So you think of this catastrophe, right? So Helen is taken by Paris off to modern-day Turkey. And I looked up how many soldiers were involved. And it's between 50 and 100,000, according to the number of ships, and 100 to 150 men per ship and so on. I also asked about reinforcements. They didn't really get any. So, and maybe these numbers exaggerated, nobody will know for sure, but we'll just go with 50 to 100,000 of the prime Greeks go over to get back Helen, right? For what? Well, because they swore a vow and so on. And by the way, they didn't use lots, right? They didn't. There's this whole scene with the lot, and you like that. That's a draft thing, like the draft lottery in the 60s for Vietnam. So they didn't use that. So they go, and the cream of Greek manhood spends 10 years. They didn't have any siege implements, right? The sort of famous siege implements most people would have seen in Lord of the Rings, the Battle of Helm's Deep and so on. They don't have any siege instruments. So they just hung around, throwing arrows over, I don't know, whatever, trying to climb the walls from time to time and raiding all the nearby villages for all of their sustenance because, of course, they had a very long supply chain to deal with, right? I mean, certainly the Aegean. Now, you can sail the Aegean even back in the day, between a week and 2 weeks, depending on the weather and so on. But that's pretty tough, right? And the other thing, too, is that there was at least one rebellion that is recorded and where the troops are like, basically, F this is ridiculous, right? We're not getting any reinforcements. We're not making any progress. It's been 10 years, and she's probably even had eggs, so what are we getting her back for anyway? And they try to get to the ships and sail back. And what does Ulysses do? He beats them with a giant staff and threatens to kill anyone who leaves. So this makes him a homicidal a-hole, just by the by.
Right.
Just by the by. And this was the incredible frustration that people had, which again can only really be matched in the modern parlance with World War I. And so all of this fighting is one man's wounded ego, right? So whether Paris abducts Helen or whether they elope, it's not really particularly clear, and we'll probably never know for sure because it'll just be someone's opinion. It's not like we've got her autobiography or anything, right? So 10 years, tens of thousands of death, a civilization destroyed, flows from one guy wanting to get his wife back. And that's horrendous. That's horrendous. So all for this, right? Now, Achilles, the Sinon character, Achilles is supposed to show up in the afterworld. That's part's taken by Sinon. There's some theory as to whether Paige was cast originally as Achilles and they changed it after Blowback. Who knows, right? But Achilles is not a hero in the way that we would really understand it. So he's the greatest warrior who ever lived. He knows it, and he uses that knowledge as a weapon against his own side. He's capable of tenderness. His love for Patroclus is the emotional spine of the poem, and of something barely human in his rage. He just desecrates Hector's body, dragging it behind his chariot. He looks magnificent and monstrous simultaneously. Homer doesn't resolve this. He holds both at once. Fate is known in advance. So Achilles has a choice: live a long life in obscurity or go to glory and an early death. He chooses glory with the full knowledge of the cost. This is the Iliad's answer to the Odyssey. 2 poems, 2 heroes, 2 opposite arguments. Odysseus chooses home, mortality, the particular. Achilles chooses legend, death, the eternal. Both poems know what the other costs. Now, it's interesting. In the middle of the war, Homer stops everything to describe the shield that Hephaestus forges for Achilles. On the shield, images of cities at peace, weddings, harvests, dancing, the ocean, fishing, the full richness of the world not at war. Homer inserts the entire civilization inside the shield, showing what is being destroyed by it. This is the greatest anti-war statement in the poem, contains not a single pacifist word. The gods make everything worse. They intervene not to save anyone, but to extend the suffering in behalf of their own favorites and quarrels. The Iliad's cosmos is not just, and this is what I was talking about with Poseidon. You killed like half a dozen of this guy. He blinded you to get away, but I'm going to punish him, right? The cosmos is beautiful, terrible, indifferent. Men die heroically for causes the gods treat as entertainment. There is no meaning assigned from above. Only the meaning the men make for themselves, which is the most modern thing about a poem 3,000 years old. So Priam walks alone into Achilles' camp to beg for his son's body. Achilles, who has been barely human, in grief and rage, looks at the old king and sees his own father. They weep together, 2 enemies who've lost everything, sharing grief in a tent, right? They're opposites. In the middle of a war that has destroyed both their worlds. The most human moment in Western literature inside the most brutal text. Homer puts it there deliberately. The war doesn't pause, the humanity doesn't disappear, both are true simultaneously. The Iliad ends with Hector's funeral. Troy has not yet fallen. Achilles has not yet died. Homer closes on grief, not victory, because that is what he thought the poem was actually about. Not who won, but what it cost. Every war since has had its Iliads, the official version that records the outcome and the true version that records the cost. Homer wrote the true version first. Most wars are still waiting for theirs. I thought that was really nicely written and a sort of good backdrop to this, because this is one of the problems, is that the war destroyed. Like, there are some decisions that destroy cultures for centuries or millennia. And this war, plus the brutality of the Odyssey as the poem describing the war, do you want to go and fight a war for nothing in particular if this is what's out there and this is how tough it is to get home? It is a pacifist text which also removes the heroic self-sacrifice on the part of the warriors that is supposed to sustain a culture and civilization after this war, after this poem. Again, 2,200 years. Greece, was ruled by others and everyone else. And that stuff is really powerful. It's sort of like the Spanish decision to go to the New World and bring all of the gold back destroyed their economy for 400 years. And now, of course, it's being destroyed in other ways. So I think the poem is really powerful as a demotivator for a kind of self-defense. So, and they say, well, you can't blame too much if people are taking liberties because it's just a made-up story. But it's not just a made-up story, right? So Odysseus returning from the Trojan War, that actually was a real thing. Troy existed at a place called Hisarlik in Turkey. Archaeological layers show destruction by fire around the late 13th or early 12th century BC, matching the traditional war date. Hittite records mention conflicts involving Vilusa, or Troy, and Achiawa, likely Mycenaean Greeks. So a war or series of raids almost certainly happened. We don't know if it was the exact 10-year siege with a wooden horse or anything like that. Now, of course, Cyclops, Sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis, they're fictional, heavily mythologized. And Troy also was it was like a Strait of Hormuz thing. It was a pretty good trading route. So maybe it had something to do with Helen. Maybe it had something to do with wanting to gain control of a trading route in order to gain taxes and so on. Ithaca is a real island. They have found relatively recently Mycenaean-era ruins, later sanctuaries where people worshipped Odysseus as a hero or cult figure. The story had deep cultural roots. So the poem's rooted in the real collapse of Bronze Age civilizations and Mycenaean seafaring culture. So when he's talking about sort of the end times of things, that's important as well. But of course, the idea that a society is destroyed by not having enough sympathy for outsiders, that's a very modern left-wing open borders kind of thing as a whole. So that's kind of important. And so, this is the math, right? So the face that launches 1,000 ships. So Homer's Iliad gives the number in the catalog of ships, 1,186 ships from 29 Greek contingents. So 50 to 120 men per ship. That's where 60,000 and over 100,000 men. Now, why did they go fight? So Greek leaders, kings and princes, were bound by an old oath they swore when Helen first married Menelaus. If anyone stole her, they'd all come to help and get her back. So once Paris took her, Agamemnon and Menelaus called in that favor. Now, some leaders, like Odysseus, actually tried to dodge it at first, but most came either out of honor, fear of shame, or political loyalty. Common soldiers had to follow their local kings. It's like a feudal duty. And if the common soldiers tried to dodge this, it was horrendous, right? In the Iliad, when the army nearly breaks and runs for home, leaders like Nestor and Agamemnon make it brutally clear anyone who tries to desert or sail off will die right there, killed on the spot, not allowed to leave. Homer shows the social pressures and shame playing a big role too. The ultimate deterrent was execution or death at the hands of their own commanders. Like this is like the First World War. You either go over the trench or I'm going to shoot you right here. Because if your local king called you to fight and you refused, beatings, public shaming, death, and so on. In the Iliad, when the army tried to flee, leaders like Odysseus physically beat men back into line with the staff. Desertion or outright refusal was treated of betrayal of the group and your leader. Common soldiers had little real choice once their king decided to go. And what I thought was interesting, too, is that the slaves didn't fight. And I've been posting about this on X a little bit because everyone's, slavery was like the worst thing. Morally, it's a great evil. But in a time of war, you were better off being a slave for two reasons. Slaves were very rarely, it did sometimes happen, but in general, slaves were not enlisted to fight because you don't want to train slaves how to fight. And also because people don't want to, like a slave costs the price of a car, right? Sort of a modern car. So $30,000, $40,000 or whatever, like a modern good car. And so the slave owners didn't want their slaves to be taken away from them and sent to fight on the front. Sometimes slaves were kept like behind the lines doing sort of support roles and so on. But if you were a slave during a time of war, you had a significantly higher chance of survival. So it wasn't like, if you could go back in time to the time of the Trojan War, would you rather be a citizen or a slave? Well, if you wanted to survive, probably a slave. And male captives were almost always killed on the spot, and this is why the Trojans fight so desperately. Surrender means death for the men and enslavement for the women and children. So that is another aspect of it as well. Now, I did ask what was the casualty rate for the Greek soldiers in the Trojan War. Now, if 100,000 plus went, I mean, I didn't exactly count the extras, but it sure didn't look like 100,000 were leaving. And of course, we can imagine just war, disease, accidents, infections, dysentery, like all of this kind of stuff as a whole. So rough modern guesses, depending on the fleet size, 30 to 40,000 Greeks died over 10 years. So nobody knows in particular. So was Greece considerably weakened by the Trojan War? Well, yes. Homer and later Greek writers described the Greek kingdoms as powerful before the war, then struggling badly afterwards. The Iliad itself hints at it, with Odysseus saying the war had drained the manpower of every city. And archaeology is right along with this. Right after the traditional Trojan War period, about 1200 BC, I'm going to not say BCE because I think it's before Jesus, right? Almost every Mycenaean palace in Greece was destroyed or abandoned. Right after, the entire Bronze Age palace system collapsed within a generation or two. So Trojan War was one main cause, or just one factor. Greece came out of that era much weaker, poorer, and more chaotic. That collapse kicked off what we now call the Greek Dark Ages. The Greek Dark Ages lasted roughly from 1100 BC to about 800 BC, so 300 years and change, right after the collapse of the Mycenaean palaces. Life got much poorer and simpler. Big palaces disappeared, writing was forgotten, long-distance trade collapsed, and populations dropped sharply. People lived in small villages instead of grand cities, and most of the fancy art and craftsmanship vanished. And things started getting better around 800 BC. The Archaic period began, and Greece slowly reconnected with the wider Mediterranean world. And this is also when the Homeric epics were finally written down. Population started growing again. More people meant more labor, more demand and pressure to innovate. Trade revived. Trade is very important, of course, for survival. Greeks began sailing and trading across the Mediterranean, bringing back wealth, ideas, and the alphabet, which they adapted from Phoenician script. And they started founding colonies all over the Mediterranean and Black Sea. This relieved pressure at home and created new markets. And so why did Greece never become a world power after ancient times? Mainly because, and I think this is related to the Odyssey and to the Trojan War, Greece spent most of the last 2,300 years under somebody else's rule. After the classical era, it fell under Macedon, then Rome, then the Byzantine Empire, and finally the Ottomans, the Turks, for nearly 400 years until independence in 1830. Being ruled by larger empires prevented it from building independent power. Even after gaining freedom, and I mean, there was my wife's parents grew up in a village. There were holes in the walls from the communists and trying to take over and so on, right? And about 10 million people in Greece, limited farmland, no huge natural resources, compared to powers like Britain, France, or Germany, lacked the population and economic base to compete on a world scale. I'm not sure about the huge natural resources thing because Japan was pretty powerful and has very few natural resources in the same kind of way. And of course, because Greece is a crossroads area, right? Like Strait of Hormuz stuff. It's constantly fought over by bigger powers as a whole. But the funny thing is that ancient Greeks did not see the Odyssey as a tragedy. It was the ultimate success story, a man using his intelligence and endurance to overcome impossible odds and finally get home. That was sort of the real tragedy in Greek eyes is not so much the Odyssey, which is the post-war story, but the Iliad. All that pointless death and destruction with no real winner. It's their all quiet on the Western Front kind of story. And so the Iliad doesn't celebrate war. It shows war as brutal, heartbreaking, and ultimately pointless. Even the great heroes like Achilles and Hector suffer terribly, and the final image of the poem is Hector's funeral, not a victory parade. And this shaped Greek thinking about war for a very long time. For centuries, Greek literature, philosophy, and even political debates carried a deep awareness of war's terrible costs. While they still fought constantly, the Iliad helped plant the idea that glory in battle always comes with immense suffering and loss, not exactly a ringing endorsement of war. And again, this goes back to me to a lot of art. It's just about teaching white males to never fight or fight back or whatever, right? So the Greeks, why did the Trojan War last 10 years? 10 years? So ancient siege warfare was incredibly difficult. Most of the time, they were camped outside the city, raiding nearby villages rather than attacking Troy itself. They had no siege engines or artillery. And both sides were evenly matched. The Trojans had strong allies from across Anatolia. The Greeks were far from home, struggling with supply lines, low morale, and so on, so they couldn't. That's why the Trojan horse was decisive in that kind of way. From ancient Greece to Troy, 500 to 650 nautical miles, which is pretty wild. Like he just had to go, again, it's not a tiny distance or anything like that, across the Aegean and Ionian seas. A good engine ship with favorable winds could cover that in about a week, 20 years, versus a week. From eastern Greek mainland, like Oilis, where the fleet gathered, it was a bit shorter, maybe 4 to 6 days sail. Isn't that wild? And let's see here. Yeah, no continual reinforcements for the Greeks. And I was curious, what was the status of free speech in ancient Greece? Because criticizing wars is a tough thing, right? So in Athens, during its democratic period, free speech was strong, especially for male citizens. They could speak openly in the assembly. They could criticize leaders and debate politics freely. Playwrights like Aristophanes openly mocked powerful politicians on stage, but only for adult male citizens. Women, slaves, and foreigners had no political voice in particular. Athens, of course, as we know from Socrates, could punish speech it disliked. In places like Sparta, as we can imagine, a whole lot less freedom of speech. Society was tightly controlled. Open criticism of the state or the military was not tolerated. So that's important as well. And so I just wanted to, abandon their posts, return home, the rebellion that soldiers have. There's a famous scene in the Iliad in Book 2. The Greek army becomes so demoralized, they suddenly rush to their ships, fully intending to abandon the war and sail home. Immediately, they are only stopped when Odysseus, at the urging of Athena, who was the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, physically beats them back into line with Agamemnon's staff and shames them into staying. This episode is called The Test of the Army. And this is after 9 years of fighting and all of that as well. So I just wanted to mention all of that kind of stuff. It doesn't so much matter what happens to a society. It matters in particular the stories that are told about what happens. And this is a very powerful story about war and its consequences. And I can't imagine another culture, maybe it would be the case for another culture, but I can't imagine another culture castigating its own war heroes. It's not very common. Like I don't see, as we've talked about before on the show, a brutal war hero, Genghis Khan, is celebrated by Mongolians. They've got statues. They've named an airport after the guy. He's on their currency. They openly celebrate this absolutely psychotic, mass rapey warlord guy. I don't know that the Muslims castigate their own warriors and their victories and so on, but it is sort of this unique thing. And of course, we don't want war, but the world is based on combat to a large degree. And if you're going to give up any martial heroism or passion for self-defense, I don't know that it lasts particularly long, and Greece went from an absolute central world power to being conquered for over 2,000 years, in part because of this war, but I think more importantly, because of this poem and the fact that it comes out at a time when the West is in crisis, I'm not sure is entirely accidental, if that makes sense.
Right.
All right. I think we've done a pretty good ramble fest. I think I got everything across that I was looking for, and that's what matters most of all, of course. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention? Would you recommend? I wouldn't recommend it. It's not even a good make-out movie. It's not even a good escapist movie. I just find it long, slow, grinding, dull, and negative as a whole. But what do you think?
No, I would also not recommend it. It was confusing, long, and then the stuff that wasn't confusing and long was irritating or frustrating.
Right.
So yeah, no, I think there are other things I had mentioned, but all sort of coming down to like this is this dark, gross sort of dirty look 'Cause, I mean, I've not actually seen Greece myself, but, you know,
Well, you've seen the
go
pictures,
look at
like the
pictures.
beautiful
Yeah.
Aegean, these
Yeah,
cities
yeah.
on the hillside with this white, and I don't know if it was that case like 3,000 years ago or whatever, but I mean, Greece is absolutely beautiful. And the fact that it looked like this, like shaking out an umbrella on the London subway line just did not seem to fit it at all. I don't know. Why can't you just make it beautiful?
I mean, ah, yeah. I was gonna say don't worry about it. It's just a random thought. But no, I don't have anything else to add here. This has been a great chat. I mean, there were a couple things that they got right, sort of, but, you know, for the most part, it's not worth going to see. I don't know if there is are there any adaptations you're aware of, to film of I mean, I guess the Iliad, but in particular the Odyssey
Oh, yeah, there's been
that
a bunch,
you
for
think
sure. Yeah, there's been a bunch
yeah,
for sure, and you can see this sort of glorious woman who played Helen of Troy, I think in the '80s or whatever, versus this woman who plays her now. So there have been a number of adaptations before. I have not watched them, and so it may be worth watching them to do a sort of comparison of the two. But I found this soulless, and I can see all these people saying, "Oh, the technicals, the cinematography, the lighting, the costumes," is like, bro, I don't care about that stuff at all. What I care about is the humanity of the story, and people's motivations didn't really make any sense. People's character arcs didn't really make any sense. I thought the acting, with the exception of John Leguizamo, was pretty good. Anne Hathaway was fantastic in my view. Everyone else was just kind of bland and dispirited and trudging their way through. And if the characters don't seem exciting, oh yeah, one other thing I want to mention. So Odysseus is like a passionate, powerful military leader, able to keep a campaign going for 10 years. And he has all the charisma of a desiccated, mold filled soap dish. I mean, it really is terrible. Here's the thing, like, I don't mean to like macho myself up or anything like that, because Lord knows I don't have his physique, even though I'm a little older. But listen, have you ever been in a situation with men who are going through incredible difficulties? Do they ever make jokes? Of course they do. I mean, when we used to have to go out in minus 35-degree weather in a hailstorm to go and get soil samples, you know, it was actually quite funny. We're like, this could not be a worse possible situation. All you can do is laugh. And it happens in the army all the time. It happens with people, if you've ever worked with manual laborers and so on, you know, they will constantly make jokes about how bad things are. There's a kind of positive humor that goes along with physical difficulties. And I just thought, where's his charisma? Where's
mm,
his Henry V ability to, you know, rally the troops, the famous sort of St. Crispin speech? Where is his flashes of insight and wisdom? Where's his leadership? Where's, like, this is a guy who is one of the most famous leaders and motivators in all of human history. I'm not saying you got to turn him into Anthony Robbins with a sword, which would look, I guess, like a toothpick in that giant banana hands guy. But where is his humor? Where is the good humor of the men who are going through these kinds of difficulties? Again, it's famous in the military that embrace the suck, right? You've heard this sort of phrase in
yeah,
the
yeah,
military.
yeah,
I've worked in very tough manual labor jobs, and people make a lot of bitter jokes and funny jokes about it, because what else are you going to do? And I don't know if Christopher Nolan has ever worked a manual labor job or talked to, you should go and talk. If I was making this movie, I'd go and spend like a month or two talking to soldiers, because that's the closest analogy that we have, and people are still people and so on. And the idea that it's all just grim, and the only passion that he showed was when he was weeping about the sirens, and everything else was just kind of staring and mumbling. And oh my God, like I just needed a flash of something I could care about, because if they're going through hell and they're making jokes, you know, that's going to give you something to admire. I admire these guys. I want them to live. But if they're just wandering around complaining and being negative and not protecting themselves and wandering into caves with no, like, the survival instincts of your average butterfly in a windstorm just doesn't. I needed something to admire. I needed something to be
mm.
passionate about. And just watching a guy in a drab landscape be attacked and be depressed for 3 hours is just not entertainment. It really felt like a root canal in IMAX.
Yeah, no, I mean, military guys and EMS, police, and all those sorts of folks, I mean, that's one of the things, it's a stereotype and often true. They have a wicked and dark sense of humor.
They do.
But, you know, but it's slash coping, but it's also like, look, I mean, oh, it is. It's not just coping in terms of like the cope that's sort of the colloquial, but no, it's actually it's how you deal with it because it sucks. Embrace the suck, like you said. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I remember.
yeah.
I remember once I was riding on the back of. It was in winter, and we had a bunch of drill bits, and I was riding on the sled being pulled by a snowmobile through the forest, and there was some guys hiking ahead, and then a friend of mine was driving the snowmobile. I was sitting on the back, and he was going to go down a steep hill, and I decided to get off because it just looked a little dangerous. So he went down the steep hill, and he hit the bottom, and the whole thing stopped. All of the drill bits got removed, and they went around him in this sort of Pulp Fiction shoot around the guy. They just went around him, and the guys looked back and see this guy had almost been speared by like 8 different drill bits, like these big, giant, like heavy drill bits. And one of them guys like, "What are you, a vampire hunter?" And it's like, because, he could have been impaled with this kind of stuff, right? And those kinds of jokes, it's just how you survive these horrible, difficult situations. There was when we were carrying these drill bits on these heavy, deep snow, and there were all these bushes down there, and you kept getting the tip of your snowshoe caught, and then it would whap up and hit you on the butt. And he's like, "I only like to be spanked by my girlfriend." This kind of stuff. Just goofy jokes that you make when you're going through these kinds of physical, horrible situations and so on. Or there was a guy when we were carrying these 80-pound weights of soil on sacks on our back, and we had to all the trees had been cut down, so they were all just jumbled. We had to go on these slippery tree trunks to get back to the road. And I just remember this guy saying, "This is the worst game of pickup sticks I've ever played," because if you slip and you get your groin mashed by some tree. And so that kind of good-humored joking about how terrible things are, I really could have seen some of that, and I think that would have
Mm,
really changed the movie, given some flash of courage and comedy, and given you something to admire, as opposed to these depressed guys like logs rolling off Niagara Falls into death, is just with barely lifting a finger to change the outcome. Anyway, all right, so we'll end
yeah.
here. Freedomain.com/donate to help out the show. If you've had thoughts, we got anything wrong, please let us know in the comments below. We'll put our sources. We'll get this out right away. And thanks, James, for your time. It was a great chat.
Yep. Great.
Bye.
Bye.